super flattered by the number of people who are here on what I understand is extremely short notice. And so I'd like to thank the X Company and Hype and our hosts here for arranging this. James gave the first public delivery of some work that we did in Stockholm just after the Let's Test conference. We found ourselves in Stockholm with a day of getting to work together face to face. This never happened. So there are all kinds of things that we wanted to talk about, but we're co-authors of the Rapid Software Testing class. But we both teach that class in our own ways, and we talk about that sort of stuff constantly on the phone anyway. And we had a couple of projects we wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about a blog post that I've been trying to write, still haven't written, on oracles and how they work in testing and the big body of stuff on that. And then I also had this thing that had been bugging me for years that I wanted to talk about, and that was the Agile testing quadrants, because certain things about them kind of drove me crazy. And I'd worked in Agile contexts, and I was hearing from Agile testers who were suffering a lot of pain. The pain was, it had a lot to do with the fact that the testers that I was talking to anyway were feeling overwhelmed and overloaded by the idea that, for example, they had to rerun all of the tests they'd ever run before in every sprint, because there was such a terrible risk of programmers breaking things. And that led me to questions about things like sustainable pace, whether that was a real thing. So anyway, we talked about it, and we got something together that we really liked, and then we ran it by a bunch of people in our community, the International Society for Software Testers. We solicited comments there. We got some good feedback. We wrote a reviewer's guide. One day we'll actually write a reader's guide or a user's guide, but we'll have to stop being either busy or lazy or both before that happens. James gave a presentation on this in Australia, and just before he gave the first public presentation of this work in Australia. Just before he gave it, I noticed how it was being built. James Bach on the real Agile software testing quadrants. And I was horrified. I know, oh God, James, you can't say that. We're context-driven. We're rapid testing. We don't hold people to any kind of religion. We can't make a claim on real. You can't do that, James. So I forced him to change the title. And then I found out that this was being tweeted by Improve or the X Company. And so it's the same kind of thing. So this is what the title really is, which is the Agile testing quadrants as we believe they always should have been. Yeah, well, yeah, really. Except, well, always, I like that. Context. What we need to do, and I'm going to complain a lot about the old Agile testing quadrants, but to some degree, that's not quite fair. It's not quite fair for me to complain about it because a couple of things. First of all, I don't think I griped loudly or at least articulately enough for people to change their minds about things that went into them. Secondly, you know, everybody deserves an honest crack at a first round of things. And we learn over time, and we learn with experience. And so, yeah, this always should have been thing, even that's really deeply problematic because we would not have done this unless we had something to respond to. So I'm going to be critical of the original and subsequent takes on the Agile testing quadrants, but I'm going to acknowledge right away that to some degree, that criticism is easy to make in hindsight. It's also easy to make after you've had 5 years of planning to make it or thinking about making it and not really doing anything about it until one day in a bunch of different cafes. I was going to say coffee shops, but cafes and stuff. Accounting for linguistic differences here. Okay, so actually that's kind of what this slide is about. This is not an attack on Agile development, and it's not an attack on the role of testing in it. It's more, I would hope, a refinement of what we believe that testing could be, should be, from our perspective. One of the things that I haven't, another blog post that I haven't done, is on the concept of the Agile testing namespace. Those of you who've been into programming for a long time know that there's such a thing as namespaces when you're declaring variables and when you're declaring methods and that sort of stuff. You declare a namespace, and that makes it convenient to say, when I say this, it's referring to this library or this way of this set of predefined variables of one kind or another. We have a namespace too. There are various things in our namespace that I'm going to talk about tonight. You're welcome to obviously share those things and import our library, as it were. But at the same time, we recognize that people use different words in different ways. For example, cafe or coffee shop. So we're not intending to attack Agile development in any way. We love the Agile Manifesto. The rapid testing is, I think, absolutely Agile, but in a small a way, rather than a big A way. We don't like some of the trappings that have come with the way certain people talk about Agile, but we love the idea of the manifesto. We love the principles, right? Individuals and interactions over processes and tools, we love that. Responding to change over following a plan, yes. Working software over comprehensive documentation, yes. Customer collaboration over negotiated contracts, yes. All these things are really wonderful. Plus the bit at the bottom, which people always seem to forget, which is, although there is value in the things on the right, we value the things on the left more. So, for example, there have been lots of myths spread about Agile development. Oh, well, you don't do documentation in Agile. Bullshit! You do it, but you don't make it the center of the work. You don't believe in contracts. You don't believe in commitments and sticking to things in Agile. Bullshit. You believe that a contract might be important, but what's more important is ongoing refinement of what we want and working that stuff out. We believe, in fact, in development. Not assembly, not construction, because at the beginning of the project, any ideas that we've got about what the project is going to look like, as Ken Kaner puts it, it's at exactly the time when we know less than we will ever know. And every next moment in the project, we've learned something. So it's not an attack on any of that stuff. We love Agile. We're small a Agile, though, instead of big A Agile, in the sense that we want to be able to recover our balance quickly when we're knocked off balance. That's what we believe Agile always should have been about. It's not about going faster, necessarily. It's being able to respond to change in a way that allows us to be pushed and tilted a little bit and then return quickly to equilibrium. Not to race and not to drive ourselves crazy as we do it. This is a redesign and a much deeper, we hope and believe, redesign of the quadrants as first presented by Brian Merrick and then built on in the book Agile Testing by Lisa Crispin and Janet Gregory. A book where there's 4 pages in it that I absolutely love in that book. Those are the pages I wrote. And I have to say, that book doesn't talk deeply about testing in the way I'd like to talk about it. The testing as an enterprise of critical thinking, of applied critical thinking. There's some good things in it, but I want to go deeper than they went in that book. Not in this talk, obviously, because you can't do that in the talk. But I want to think more deeply about testing than what went on in that book. So what we're trying to do is take that kind of deep thinking about testing from a community of people that we belong to, a school of thought, the context-driven school of thought, where we try really, really hard to think deeply about testing, to think deeply about different ways of doing testing, to honor a bunch of diverse approaches to doing testing, to honor the role of tools in the hands of skilled people using them, and to put the tester at the center of testing. Not the tools, not the process model, not the documentation, but to put the individual tester, the skill set and the mindset of the individual tester at the center of testing. So, we also want to take Agile development and show it in its best light too. So that's kind of our goal there. And we want to explain, because we get asked this a lot, how does rapid testing fit into Agile context? And Hype actually brought to my attention a lovely expression by Scott Barber when Scott said that testing is testing, Agile is context. So we want to talk about how to do testing, our flavor, our style of testing, rapid software testing in an Agile context. So there's your premise. What is the role of testers? What do testers do? Over the last several years, we've been working on refining that, and there's lots of different ways of expressing it. One is that a tester's job is to help clients understand the product they've got, so our clients can understand whether it's the product they want. Jerry Weinberg said that testing was gathering information with the intention of informing a decision. Cam Kainer, lawyer, said that testing is an empirical technical investigation of software done on behalf of stakeholders with the intention of revealing quality-related information of the kind that they seek. Can you tell that Ken was a lawyer? But I mean, that's a wonderful definition of testing, in that it's absolutely true. Little lengthy, so sometimes to be snappier, James and I would say that testing is questioning a product in order to evaluate it. And then a few years ago I started making a distinction between testing and checking, about which more later. But in developing that bit of work, which happened a year and a half ago to a much greater degree than we'd done before, what we came up with then is the idea that testing is learning about a product, evaluating a product by learning about it through experimentation. Focus in testing is on performing experiments with the product. Big experiment, little experiments, to some degree social science experiments, taking a qualitative approach, which means lots and lots of different observations to be made, lots and lots of different things to observe, lots of instances of each thing to observe, doing experiments and quasi-experiments on a product. So what we came up with then is that testing is learning about a product through experimentation. And that the role of a tester is to do that, but also to develop him or herself as a tester, to study products, to connect with the clients, to interact with the clients, to learn how to explain, how to model, how to perform testing, how to prepare for testing, and to do all those things in a big, turbulent soup of activity. Like a big vat of soup that's being stirred with a great big spoon. And then to report on all that so our clients can make informed decisions about risk. Why is this, and nothing else, a testing role? Because that's what it means to do testing, so far as we're concerned. That's always what it meant to do testing, to think critically about a product, to question it in order to evaluate it. That's what testing is. There are some views of thought that think that testing is kind of like a quality policing or sort of project management without the authority. That really, I mean, a lot of the time, testers are asked for a ship decision. Well, how is that a tester's decision? It's not a technical decision, first of all, it's a business decision. And I think that testers are eager to take on that decision, which I think is a usurpation of the project management role, and project managers are eager to slough it off, because, among other things, it helps them to avoid making hard decisions, the kind of hard decisions that you have to make as a product manager or program manager. And so we want to get out of that business. We want to get out of the quality assurance business, and we want to get out of the quality policing business. We've seen a lot of pathological stuff from testers over the years. And in fact, Agile, I think, when it got started, what I heard from a lot of the people who were there at the start, who were involved with Original XP, for example, is that they were working with testers who weren't being terribly helpful, but who were absolutely sure of how to tell the programmers how to do their jobs. Ugh. If you want to do that, try being a programmer for a little while. If you want to tell the program managers how to do their jobs, tell them, you can't ship this, try being a program manager for a little while. I did. It's a really hard job. And the very least we could do is respect the people who are doing that job and inform them rather than try to instruct them.
So all those roles are clients of testing in your definition?
All those roles, yeah, all those things that managers, programmers, all of those are people to whom we provide a service and to whom we should not be an obstacle. So yes, thank you for saying that. By the way, what's your name?
Harry.
Harry. I have a limited number of these with me. I'm sorry about it. I ran out before I left Toronto. Another 1,000 came in, but Harry gets that. I'm trying to do that as an incentive to get people to talk during this thing, because we're going to be here for a while. And if you have to listen to me the whole time, it's going to get dull. I encourage you to test it.
No cookies.
There's hidden features.
Experiment with
Well, you just asked about the tester's role. And so somebody responds to that sometimes. A lot of people, I had some people at CAST, the big conference for the Association for Software Testing, who were so, it was kind of sad. They took this to believe that all a tester can ever do is look for bugs. All we do is test, by which they meant apparently all we do is sit in front of the product and interact with it at the keyboard. And we can't do anything else. What they miss about testing is learning about a product through experimentation. It's the idea that you can perform thought experiments on a product. You can perform experiments on somebody's idea of the product. You can perform experiments on somebody's description of the product by raising the question, well, what if? By saying, if that's true, does that mean this is true? You're saying this. Does this also mean that, and that, and that? By extension, by inference, is it the case that that diagram shows this, but is there stuff missing from the diagram? What they were really asking was, can't we go to those meetings too? It'd be really nice for us to go to those meetings. We want to help. We want to be an influence. I said, well, if you want to be an influence, that's great. Be an influence by being a tester, by doing great skilled testing work, and that includes testing people's ideas from the moment somebody gets the idea of the product. Somebody draws a diagram, question the diagram. Perform thought experiments on the diagram. If somebody produces a specification of some kind, perform thought experiments on the specification. If somebody has a component, perform experiments on the component. What this means is that as critical thinkers for hire, professional critical thinkers, we can involve ourselves in any part of the product in which we are welcome. And by doing that skillfully, I hold, we will become welcome because those questions are valuable parts of what we call development. So, Does that mean testers should only sit in front of a keyboard looking for bugs after somebody's built something and handed it to us, as Bob Martin says, dumping a great load of code on the testers? Well, let's look at that. If I'm a programmer, can I do testing? Of course you can. That means, what this also means, of course, is that programmers can do testing too. If I'm a tester, can I make quality better? Well, yeah, sure. If I'm a goalie, can I score goals too? No rule against it. If I'm a janitor, can I offer suggestions to the CEO? Why not? If I'm the driver of a car, can I grab the steering wheel? Hey, feel free. Let's look at these in a little bit more detail. If I'm a developer, can I do testing? Sure. If you're a developer, you already do testing. Developers are great testers. There's a guy at Star Canada this year who said that developers can't test. Developers can't test, developers shouldn't test because developers can't test, he said. How do you know they can't test? I said, well, look at what they give us. It's all full of bugs. And as a developer who is given stuff to testers to test, I can say, yeah, but you should have seen it before. As a writer, I can find more problems in my stuff than anybody. And I fix them before I give them to my editors. And then I find out that I'm not perfect. My editors find stuff that I missed. My editors find a flaw in my logic as I'm developing an argument, and they point that out to me. My editors point out just before shipping that there's a problem in the a product that I should address. Where were you 2 hours ago, just before I went out to dinner with your fantastic ideas on how to make this better? See, that's what happens when you don't involve your testers early enough. See, so developers are fantastic testers. They're great testers. They're doing testing all the time. It's just they're not perfect. Nobody's capable of seeing all the problems in the stuff that they're creating. Nobody's capable of doing that. And so, to suggest that developers are not testers, or that developers shouldn't do testing, go away. The problem is we have handicaps and biases and cognitive lapses, and to some degree we can train ourselves out of some of them. So if you want to be an even better developer than you are, if you want to be an even better tester of your own work, there's certain skills and there's certain biases, skills that you'll have to develop, biases that you'll have to become aware of, that if you develop those skills and you address or try to manage those biases, you'll be even better at what you do, both the testing part and the development part. If I'm a tester, can I make quality better? Sure. And you have to acknowledge as you're doing that if you adopt the position of a designer, you want to make a suggestion about the product, two things are important to keep track of. One is, you may not have the skills that the designer has. I mean, most of us as testers, we believe we know a lot about user experience. Oh yeah? We know a lot about being users, but do we know about being good students of user experience? Somebody is doing something to me, so I'm going to make them stop. Pardon me. Rookie mistake here. There we go. See, I tested everything before. I made sure the microphone was working and was stashed up here properly and so on. Didn't turn off my phone. Not a perfect tester. So if I'm going to make suggestions about the product, I want to be careful. I want to be really careful. I don't want to be usurping the designer's role or the developer's role. And if I'm going to do that really well, I need to sharpen my skills and study UX, study programming, study information design, study architecture, and those sorts of things, so that I can be credible. And so that I can make good decisions instead of annoying, or good suggestions instead of annoying ones. Moreover, I also have to take into account that when I leave the goal crease, I am not allowed to use my hands as the goalie, right? Nor, another problem is that the goal is untended when I do that. And somebody else is going to have to step in and be the goalkeeper, except they're not allowed to use their hands either. So we're working at a disadvantage. If I try to run downfield and try to score a goal, I have to be aware of the costs of that instead of the potential value of it. And I'm no striker, right? As a goalie, I probably have focused my energies and my skills on developing goaltending skills instead of goal scoring skills, despite whatever harebrained idea I might have about how to score a goal right now, right here. There's a reason we have roles on a football team. We have roles on a football team to organize the attack, to organize the approach, and to take advantage of skills that we have and that we've developed. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I love the idea of being a generalist, but I also have a specialty as a generalist. I've been a programmer in my career. I've been a program manager. I've been a documenter, and I've been a tester. Well, my natural affinity is to gravitate towards the testing role. But that doesn't mean I can't do the other stuff. It does mean that when I am doing the other stuff, I'm abandoning my testing role, at least for a while. So I want to be conscious of that and keep track of it. As a janitor, can I offer suggestions to the CEO? Why, sure. And he may offer some suggestions to me back, because that's his right as the CEO, and it's not necessarily his role to listen to me, and it's not necessarily his role to follow my advice. I want to be helpful, but I don't have, as a janitor, I don't have the information that the CEO has. Moreover, CEO is probably more interested in my services of sweeping the floor, because he needs somebody to do that. If I'm not the driver of a car, can I grab the steering wheel? Well, feel free. If you want to accept the risks of what's going to happen when you try to grab it from somebody who's competent to drive. Now, if somebody's had a heart attack and grabbing the steering wheel will help, okay, then feel free. But let's not, otherwise you can ask nicely. Hey, when I was a kid, I used to grab the steering wheel, because you used to be allowed to do, able to do that. When I was 5 and 6 years old, I used to sit on my dad's lap and steer the car. Or at least, that's what he allowed me to believe. That was kind of fun. So I would ask, Daddy, can I drive? And he'd put me in his lap. It was amazing what we used to do when we were kids. It's remarkable I don't have a steering wheel print somewhere on my chest. You had a question?
Yeah, Mike. Coming back to the temporary adoption of a development role, but when do you go for it, and when do you back out again?
Well, I'll tell you my perspective on it, because I can't tell you what yours ought to be. My perspective on it is I'm actually not that interested in doing it very often. I'm not that interested in taking responsibility for changing the code. I'm going to leave that to people with expertise in it. If I see a bug someplace, I think it's probably a better idea, just for the sake of keeping things organized, for me not to change it unilaterally on my own. Now, that's my mindset and my motivation. If I want to learn programming, that's fine. If I want to work with the programmers to sharpen my skills as a programmer, if I want to pair with a programmer to try to help anticipate some problems in the code, or to go over to review it, to learn something about it, those are all okay things. But my natural inclination is still going to be to take a very testerly approach to that. There's another thing I might do, though, as a tester, and that is I might become a programmer to develop a tool that I need in order to do the testing work. When I'm doing that, I got two hats on at the same time, but I am kind of being a developer in pursuit of something to aid testing. Now, James has a lovely thing that he says about this. He says that if you're a tester, it's a really nice idea to treat programmers like a friend with a pickup truck. Right? You want to be nice to friends who have a pickup truck, because they can do you great favors and save you a lot of money and a lot of time sometimes, but you do have to respect what they're doing. He says if you want to, as a tester, you have two choices. He says you can learn to write code, or you can learn to be charming. I find it easier. Personally, I can't stand the fiddliness of having to be a programmer these days. I live in awe of programmers who are willing to put up with the crap that programmers produce for other programmers. The nitpicky little configuration details, the fact that it doesn't quite install, the fact that certain libraries get left out, the fact that it's really poorly documented, the fact that you have to tinker and explore in order to do all that stuff. I just can't stand it. So if I've got a friend who's willing to do that on my behalf, God bless him. That's the best thing in the world.
No, that's operations.
That's operations, maybe. Yeah, let them do it. Let them set it all up. But you know, I want to provide a service to people, and if I'm trying to perform a different activity, I might be letting that service drop. So I really have to think about it from moment to moment, about what my goals are and what the goals of the project are too. All right. Oops, went the wrong way. There are some roles that you're not really allowed to give up. Right? I'm a father, I'm a parent, and I have to manage that. And one of the ways I do that, I have to travel an awful lot for my job, and this year I'm bringing my wife and my kid, a lot of different places, because otherwise I wouldn't see them. That's part of my responsibility as being a father. I have to keep in close touch with my daughter, and so there's some roles where aspects of it are a good deal less negotiable. But I don't have to be a tester all the time on the project, but it's a role that I've taken on, and it basically frames a set of services that I offer. That's what I want to do. I want to offer those services to the project. All right. Next thing I have to deal with is I have to do a little bit of linguistic tidying up. Some of you will already be aware of this. Some of you will not. For the benefit of those who aren't, I'm going to talk about it. About 5 years ago, at the Agile conference in Chicago, 2009. Happy 5th birthday testing and checking. This thing happened to me, or around me, that I thought was kind of weird. It was Arlo Belshi and Jim Shore, I think. James Shore giving a talk, Brittle and Slow, Why Integration Tests Have to Go. And I thought that was pretty weird to start with. I mean, brittle and slow. My friend Fiona Charles, a lot of you know Fiona, she specializes in doing system and integration testing for big banks, big retail, big telecom, the big insurance. The bigger, the hairier the project, the more she loves it. And she does integration testing on those projects, and it's neither brittle nor slow. It's fast, it's flexible, it's adaptable, it's smart. So that mystified me. And then I listened to what some of the people were saying. It was a kind of interactive thing, and some people were saying some pretty weird stuff. Like this one guy who was saying, we changed our database structure and all our tests broke. Wait a minute, tests don't break. Tests are activities. Tests are performances. Tests are things that I do. You can't talk about a test that I'm doing breaking. That's like saying, I was in King Lear. I was playing the fool in King Lear, and they changed the stage, and all of my acting broke. What? Doesn't make any sense. Another guy just said something that just blew me away. He said, manual testing sucks. What does that mean? Because, well, first of all, well, he's right about one thing. Manual testing, the concept of manual testing sucks. Because testing is neither manual nor automated. Testing is testing. Testing is a performance. We don't talk about automated research or manual research. We don't talk about automated parenting or manual parenting, except as a joke, right? It's like, oh, put the kids in front of the automated parent, the TV, right? But that's whimsical. That's just a joke. We don't talk about automated teaching. We don't talk about manual teaching. Why do we don't talk about automated management or manual management?
That would help.
Well, it might help. Probably not, though, because it would be even worse. Automation, media, as Marshall McLuhan called it, are ways in which we extend our powers, ways in which we extend ourselves. A medium, said McLuhan, is anything that humans create or use to effect a change. Automation, tools, media have these important effects that McLuhan described when he talked about the laws of media. Automation extends, enhances, accelerates, enables, intensifies some human capability in some way. But it also extends, accelerates, intensifies, enhances, enables incapabilities too. Tools, media, as McLuhan put it, are agnostic about what they're amplifying, about what they're extending, and they extend us in all directions at once. I say this a lot during the class. If you are a crappy tester, then automation will allow you to do even crappier testing more effectively and more extensively than ever. Right? You'll do even worse testing if you are extending it with tools. If you're a bad tester. If you're a fabulous tester, you will do even more fabulous testing, and you'll do it quicker, and you'll do it more intensely, and you'll do it in a way that enables your testing superpowers. But the tool is agnostic as to what it's amplifying, and it amplifies stuff in all directions at once. So I realized that there's a penny drop for me. I've been thinking of this for the previous 6 or 8 months, and it harkened back to something. I realized later on it harkened back to something that I heard, change detectors. Now when we talk about what we call automated tests, I hate that expression now with an even greater passion than I did then. It's not automated tests that we're talking about, it's automated checks. That there's this thing that we do, checking. It's about verification and comparing a predicted output to an actual output. That's checking, it seems to me. Whereas testing is something deeper and richer than that, and the checking stuff is embedded in testing work. Testing is something that happens before and after a check, in that we have to, when we think about the possibility of even checking something, there's a risk that we've got in mind. And there's a question that we have to ask of the program. And then there's a task we have to do where we turn that question into a binary yes or no kind of answer. You know, true or false, pass or fail, green or red, like that. And that requires human judgment and wisdom. And then we have to encode that question, that binary question, into some form. Typically programming code, but maybe sometimes into a test script that we give to a human to perform. Ugh. But then after the check is performed, that part is completely automatable and automated. Then we have to interpret what happened. If we get something red, well, you know, it's not an automatic that there was a problem in the product. Maybe there was a problem in the check. Or there's a problem in how we framed the check. Or maybe there was a coding error someplace in the check. Or maybe the equipment wasn't set up properly and the check never really happened. Plus, I think it'd be a really good idea to do that every now and again for checks that did pass. How often does that happen? And lots of stories people have. Lots of people tell variations on this story where you change the name of the application being tested, and some alarming percentage of the automated tests still pass.
How does this fit in the Plan, Do, Check, Act circle?
I think that Plan, Do, Check, Act should be Plan, Do, Test, Act, as we shall shortly see. I think I want to, again, this is the rapid testing namespace. I want to make this particular stipulation a check. Checking is something that could be done algorithmically. We observe the product in specific ways to collect specific observations, and we evaluate those by applying algorithmic decision rules. Both of these things are algorithmic, and then we have algorithms to help us report any failed checks. So a check is three things. It's an observation. The observation is linked to a decision rule, such that both the observation and the decision rule can be applied algorithmically, which means that a check can be performed by a machine, which cannot think, but which has the virtue of being quick and precise. Or a check can be performed by a sufficiently disengaged human being who has been instructed not to think and just do what he or she is told. We send such things to India a lot of the time for people to perform, and I think that's monstrous. First of all, it's an incredible waste of human talent. The people in India are really, really smart. And whatever prejudices people have about Indian testers, I've been there, and I can tell you those prejudices are mostly wrong. They're no more right than they would be here, except for one thing. Dumb Western companies make the stupid mistake of trying to program Indian testers and interpret the results as though those Indian testers were machines. Ugh! That's like, I think that's, inhumane, basically. There's so much more value we could get out of those folks if we let them be testers. If we stop trying to program them, if we stop giving them test scripts, and of course that's just as true here. The whole business of trying to program people to go through a list of specific instructions to make specific observations is almost always a pathology, as far as I'm concerned. It's a disease. So, testing then is distinct from checking. Now, one mistake, I'm willing to call it a mistake now. I've tried for ages and ages to persuade people that it was a mistake, but I'll cop to it as a mistake in that I really believe that more people will be clever enough to notice that testing versus checking, as I made the distinction, would be one of a distinction between this thing versus another thing, not like Barcelona versus Milan. That's not what I meant. I didn't mean it to be a competition, and I didn't mean that there was this and there was this. What I actually meant is that there was this inside of this, right? The testing was the larger thing in which checking was embedded, in the same way as leaves versus trees, right? If I say leaves versus trees, nobody gets really upset because they can visualize it, they can see it really easily. Leaves versus trees basically amounts to the idea that if somebody has a pile of leaves sitting there on the grass, and they point to it, and they say, see this? This is my tree. We think he's a little bit silly. Well, leaves are parts of trees, and to a great degree, most trees have lots of leaves on them. But leaves are not trees. So when I say leaves versus trees, nobody gets upset. When I said testing versus checking, a lot of people get upset. I don't know why they failed to make that distinction. They saw them as being in opposition to one another. They're not. Checking is contained inside testing, like this. Checking is operating a product to check specific facts about it. But that's embedded in this business of evaluating a product by learning about it through experimentation, which includes, without limitation, observation, study, conjecture, the design of the experiments. It includes inference, modeling, It includes wondering what might happen if we do this. It includes reporting. It includes sketching. It includes a whole bunch of things. But even that isn't quite all there is to testing. Testing is embedded in more stuff than that. It's embedded in the process of developing yourself as a tester, creating the conditions necessary to do all that stuff so that we can help clients make informed decisions about risk. But that's even involved in a bigger process, which is acquiring the skill, the intention, the motivation, the expertise, the credibility to do all those other things in which testing is embedded. That's what testing is all about there. Oh, and by the way, little beneficial side effect. By doing testing, we contribute to making the product better too, by providing information to our clients that they can use to inform decisions about risk. So, off to the world of what testing really means. And as you can see, there's quite a bit to it, really. You want to be a tester? That's the kind of stuff that I think we have to do. And we have to get good at all those things if we want to be fabulous testers. We have to keep working on those things. Yes, no, there's a lot to do. So none of us is ever going to be perfect at all of them. But I think we have to consider which of these things we want to get good at and keep trying to get good at them. Yes?
What is galumphing?
Galumphing! Oh, thank you for asking. A lot of people notice that. The word galumphing comes from Lewis Carroll's poem Jabberwocky, which is in Alice Through the Looking Glass. The 1, 2, 1, 2, and through, the vorpal blade went snicker snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. Galumphing. Do you get it now? See, that clears up a lot, I bet. Galumphing is a term that somebody started using to describe playful variation, improvisational, elaborate behavior that is intended to essentially have some kind of action on things that ought to be inert. So, for example, one thing I might do when I'm testing, I might do something in an overly elaborate way. For example, I'll bring up a dialog box and then dismiss it. And I'll bring it up again and then dismiss it. And I'll make a selection from it and then dismiss, say apply, and then go back to it and see if it's still there when it comes back. And if it is, well, then I'll change it back to the original thing and see if I can get the program sort of confused by this playful variation on what a normal user might do. Why? A lot of people say you should test like a user. Well, some users actually do that, but more importantly, I think we should test like testers and see if there's some way we can elaborate on what's in front of us instead of following the happy path. In music, galumphing, sometimes you hear musicians talking about noodling, right? It's improvisational, whimsical sometimes. So it's doing this stuff that's, I think, kind of fun and playful. And that's how kids learn, by the way. That's how people learn. It's really hard to learn if you're driven hard focused down the center of something. I think it's much more interesting to look at the edges and to wander a little bit and then to come back to the path every now and again. We find that, how many people here have dogs? You ever notice how your dog knows a lot more about the sides of the footpath than you do? Because the dog is always, backing up and going forth and backing around. Dogs galumph a lot. So that's what galumphing is. Any other interesting words up there that require some clarification? Okay. Well, so do users. That reminds me of yet another James Bach joke, by the way, which I since we're bringing up dogs. You know how there's this practice at some companies of dog fooding, right? Eating your own dog food. You use your own product in your own business. And they call it, at Google they talk about this, they give Google stuff to the admins and to everybody else at Google, right? They make them all use Google Docs, and that's called dog fooding. And as James pointed out, the trouble with dog fooding is if you have a dog, this dogs will eat anything. Thank you, James, for that joke. All right, let's talk to the quadrants now. I first banged into them in 2003 or so, after James started talking to Brian Merrick about them. I was on the Agile testing mailing list at the time. And the thing that bugged me about that, and continued to bug me for about 5 years, was that here was the Agile Manifesto, and people were talking about processes and tools. And I wanted to talk about individuals and interactions. I wanted to talk about problems in programs. I wanted to talk about problems that people were trying to solve. And they wouldn't stop talking about the products and tools. And I kept getting apologists from the Agile community saying, well, the processes and tools, they're just a means to an end, That's why we're focused on them, because it's really important to master those things. I think, yes, it is, but we're putting them in the center again, just like the Agile Manifesto suggested that we oughtn't. And the thing about the Agile testing community was that it seemed to me, as somebody deeply interested in testing, that they were focused on programmer testing. They were focused on a particular kind of testing, and even that, they weren't actually focused on testing too much. They were fascinated by, over the last few years, especially, people involved in Agile testing have become fascinated by green vegetables of one kind or another. Cucumber and gherkin and all this sort of stuff. Gherkin is like cucumber in a pickle, I suppose. But anyway, I got tired of that. At one point, I was talking to Ken Kaner, and I said, why am I bothering to participate in this stuff? Why do I keep arguing with these people and fighting with these people? Why am I still interested? And Cam sort of dryly said, well, maybe it's because they're taking the most humanist approach to software development that's come along in the last 30 years, and they're dehumanizing it. And I said, oh, thanks, that's it, right. So not very long after that, I quit the list. I wasn't interested anymore. I couldn't get interested in it. I believe that the quadrants, the way that people were oversimplifying testing in an Agile context, helped to feed that. So we've learned a lot about that, and just 2 days ago, I found out Gojko Acik, in Chapter 8 of some book that he's apparently working on, we've talked about this a little bit in the past, he's working on some other version of Agile Quadrants. I think this is a wonderful thing. I think this is like European languages. We all have lots of ideas. It's great to have lots of languages to talk about them in, because languages have this expressive power, and different versions of the Agile Quadrants are going to have expressive power, and it's going to be interesting to talk about the differences between them and learning from each other's cultures and that sort of stuff. And it's nice to see this springing up of some diversity of ideas about how to think about testing in Agile context. Yay! So, here's a problem, a big problem, my biggest problem with the original Agile Quadrants, and when James delved into this and started looking at it, he noticed something really interesting.
But Merrick is a programmer, isn't he?
Well, Merrick's, he used to be, what did he call himself? He called himself a consultant in Agile software development with a special interest in testing. And to some degree, I think he's relaxed that interest. He wrote a really interesting book when I first got engaged in thinking deeply about testing. I was pointed to this book by Kim. It's called The Craft of Software Testing. It had one really weird example in it of a function that he was going to set up some tests for. And of course, in retrospect, I look at them as checks. What blew me away was the example that he was using was from an open source thing. It was from, was it GoScript? The original open source version of a PostScript interpreter. And there was this function that was just so weird, where for some reason they were putting this thing into a 2-byte data structure and then iteratively reading through the 2-byte structure. and depending on how, whether it was an even number, or even or odd length of the string, it would go through these weird machinations, and I couldn't see any reason why a tester, a skilled tester, especially one who was skilled in programming, would ever look at this and say, I've got a really good way to test this, instead of saying, dude, are you really happy with the way this came out? You know, wouldn't you want to, I mean, as a tester, that's what I would do. I'd look at it and I'd say, big risk here, big potential problems in here. Are you really okay with this? So it was, in a certain kind of sense, an odd book, but it was really important for its time. And James, in his original version of this talk, said something that I would like to also say, that Brian is a very smart guy. He is a programmer. He was genuinely interested in testing. I think he made a big difference in getting the programming community interested in testing. And there's a special thing about Brian for me, which is we don't talk that much anymore. One thing that he did, and I'm pretty sure that if he didn't do it, we're not having this conversation, which is he got me to write some columns for Better Software magazine. I had a programming column for Better Software magazine, and Brian was my editor. And I talked about the role of an editor as a tester of writers. Brian was a breathtakingly good critic of my work, and I'm very proud of those articles, and Brian had an immense role in that. So you said, isn't he more of a programmer? Brian